What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Trade Talk Tuesday. Today we're going to be talking about 5 realistic needle movers that the Portland Trail Blazers could potentially look to trade for this upcoming offseason. Now, before we jump into things, these targets might not be available. It's always hard to put together a list full of targets that are going to become available, and that was especially the case this offseason, as it feels like a lot of role players are kind of entrenched in their teams or free agents. It was actually really difficult to come up with this list, but I got a few names, some of which we've talked about in live streams over on our second channel, Blazers Uprise Live. So if you want to catch us on Mondays and Thursday nights, go subscribe to that channel. Some of these guys are guys we've talked about, some of these guys aren't. None of these guys would require the 3rd overall pick, and all of these guys could be follow-up moves to a potential 3rd pick trade. Right now, the leading trade idea for that 3rd pick would be Anthony Simons and the 3rd pick for Jaylen Brown from the Boston Celtics. We went in depth on that last night. We've been talking about it for a month or so. Eric had info on Jaylen Brown over a month ago, but this is not the time to be talking about that. We're talking about under-the-radar needle movers. So without further ado, let's jump into things with trade target number 1. The first target I have is Daniel Gafford. This is a guy we've talked about. He's only making $1.9 million before the new league year, which starts on June 30th, coinciding with the start of NBA free agency. Next season, his salary gets bumped up above $12 million. However, he doesn't have the normal poison pill for a player this young seeing a contract extension. So therefore, the Portland Trail Blazers could absorb Daniel Gafford with their smallest TPE, which is a $2.6 million trade exception that they got in the Josh Hart trade. Therefore, Portland wouldn't have to trade anything out for Daniel Gafford, and then they could bring him in as long as they traded for him before free agency started. Washington might be willing to do this because they may be getting cold feet on Daniel Gafford's contract extension, might not be wanting to pay him $12, $13, $14 million the next 3 years. So this could be as simple as Portland trading cash or a minimum contract for Daniel Gafford and bringing him in, and he could be a serviceable backup center. He blocks a decent amount of shots, but as you know, you can't really gauge defense that way. I still think he's solid though. He can finish well offensively. I just think he's a better version of Drew Eubanks with a little bit more upside. I also think he's better positionally on defense than Drew Eubanks is. I had a lot of critiques of Drew Eubanks last year. I thought he ended up becoming overrated. If you're curious for my thoughts on him, go check out his player review that I dropped about a month ago. The second trade target I have for the Blazers is Alex Caruso of the Chicago Bulls, and there's a couple different reasons why. As far as the Bulls go, they own Portland's 2024 first-round pick, and it's lottery protected for multiple years, and it could be in Portland's best interest to try and reduce the protections on that pick, especially if they make a Jaylen Brown trade, in order to free up future first-round pick draft capital that they can use via trade. With Alex Caruso, he's a great defensive player, 6'4", can play the point or the 2, and in a Anthony Simons trade, Portland would need a backup point guard, and one that can defend at the level that Alex Caruso can would be absolutely huge. He shot 36% from 3. He's just a well-rounded offensive player who's not going to do anything super flashy or super impressive, but won't make many mistakes and will just be a solid contributor on that end. And defensively, he's arguably one of the best guard defenders in the entire NBA. So getting a guy like that off the bench, maybe paired with Matisse Thybulle, would give the Blazers bench unit a really good defensive duo. Now, it was said that the Bulls were looking for 2 first-round picks for Caruso at this past year's trade deadline. I think that that's a little bit steep. I would be hopeful that Chicago would be willing to come down on their asking price a little bit, but the main 2 reasons why I included Alex Caruso in this video is because I think he'd be a really good fit on that Blazers bench, but then also maybe you could clear up future firsts while you also trade for Alex Caruso. Maybe it's reducing the protections on the 2024 first owed to Chicago, trading them a 2026 first that's a little bit protected, and then trading a 2nd round pick or 2 and you get Alex Caruso off the bench. Maybe that's still a little bit steep, but I could see Portland maybe looking to trade for Caruso as part of reducing the protections on the 2024 first they owe to Chicago. It would be really interesting to see if that would be the case. As far as my next target goes, it's actually 3 guys from one team. In this team I've talked about a ton. I dropped 2 videos in a row talking about a specific player from this team. However, this specific player is not going to be listed, as I think even if the Portland Trail Blazers don't trade for Mikal Bridges from the Brooklyn Nets, there's still guys on that team that would make a lot of sense for the Portland Trail Blazers. The first one is obvious. We've talked about him a ton, and that is Nick Claxton. who's only 24 years old. Next year will be his 5th year in the NBA, and he's developed into one of the best defensive centers in the entire league. He's super switchable, quick on the perimeter, quick off his feet, blocks a ton of shots, and is just really solid defensively. He finishes well around the rim, shot 70% from the field, which led the league, to go along with averaging almost 13 points and 9 boards. He averaged 2.5 blocks per game in 30 minutes. Those are really solid numbers, but his defensive prowess goes far outside of when he's blocking shots. He covers ground super quickly, he rotates quickly, he's a smart defensive player. He has a lot of traits that you look for in a true rim protector. As far as upgrading Jusuf Nurkic at the center spot, Nic Claxton has been my favorite target because I think he could have a major impact on the Portland Trail Blazers defense and can do things on that end of the floor that Jusuf Nurkic struggles a little bit with. I think Nurkic is underrated defensively, but I think Claxton would be a definite upgrade, so he is a target to keep an eye on. Now, Brooklyn is probably not looking to trade him, so it's probably not easy to get a deal done. As far as value, I've seen a lot of people on the internet from other fan bases, other teams say that they feel like Nic Claxton's trade value is worth 2 first-round picks. 2 first-round picks might be worth it for Claxton if you make that Jaylen Brown trade, because if you have Jaylen Brown, Jeremy Grant, and Nic Claxton as your starting front court, then defensively that's really good, and offensively Jaylen Brown is obviously a pretty impactful player as a second-team All-NBA guy. Even if the Blazers don't make the Jaylen Brown trade, Nic Claxton would still make a ton of sense. Now, next year he's on an expiring contract, making about $9.1 million. The Nets would actually have to trade out a little bit more with him to match a Jusuf Nurkic, and next offseason Claxton's going to be an unrestricted free agent. That might be the one reason why there's a chance that the Nets could move him this summer. I don't think it happens, but I think it's possible, and I think Claxton is a guy the Blazers should take a look at. Speaking of other guys on this Nets team, I would love them to take a look at Dorian Finney-Smith as well, who's making approximately $13 million. Really good 3-and-D player. Kind of struggled when he got to Brooklyn, but was huge for Dallas in their Western Conference Finals run in 2022. With Brooklyn having a ton of wings, they could definitely look to move off Dorian Finney-Smith and maybe save some money salary-wise. Portland could match Finney-Smith in the new league year by trading out Nasir Little and Keon Johnson, and then I think the Blazers would have to give up some extra value on top of that. Hopefully it would only be a couple seconds, and hopefully it would be a situation where the Blazers are buying low on DFS and can get him playing like he did in Dallas, where in his final full 2 seasons for the Mavericks, he shot 39% from 3, 47% from the field, averaged 10 to 11 points per game, and provided some lockdown defense. I think Finney-Smith could have a true difference for the Blazers defensively and would be a guy that they should definitely add if possible. And with him being on a Nets team with a lot of wings and not playing too well for him, this could be the perfect time to buy. Another Nets wing is Royce ONeill, and for all the same reasons why Dorian Finney-Smith might be traded, it also applies to Royce ONeill. It's going to be interesting to see how the Nets clear up a bit of a logjam there on the wing. Last season for the Nets, Royce ONeill shot 39% from 3, but only 38% from 2. 70% of his field goals were 3-point attempts, so that 2-point percentage doesn't really matter, but he was much better than that from 2 in Utah. He shot 61% from there last year, so I don't know why Royce ONeill was so bad inside the arc, but that doesn't really matter. He's basically just a 3-and-D guy who can also pass the ball a little bit. He averaged 3.7 assists per game for the Nets last season. If you've noticed so far, all of these targets are guys that I think could help the Blazers out defensively, because that is the biggest issue with the Portland Trail Blazers. And as far as Royce ONeill and Dorian Finney-Smith go, I think they would help the Blazers' biggest defensive issue, which is their inability to contain dribble penetration, especially from guards. Another guy that would help with that is Anthony Melton of the Philadelphia 76ers. Philadelphia's in a weird spot this offseason. It's rumored that James Harden is leaving to go back to the Houston Rockets. And in that scenario, I have no idea what the Philadelphia 76ers try and do. Maybe they move off Joel Embiid at that point. It's hard to say, but in terms of building a team around him, the Philadelphia 76ers are kind of stuck as a team without many assets. I think that they would elect to keep Anthony Melton, but I have his name on this list for a reason, and that is because he fits into the Portland Trail Blazers' $8.3 million trade exception that they got spot in the GP2 trade. Before the new league year, Melton is making $8.2 million, and then once free agency starts, that actually goes down to only $8 million. So his contract fits into that pretty nicely. I wonder if the 76ers might try and save some money, or maybe they need to send out some salary to a third team as part of a bigger trade where they try and replace the impending hole that they'll have if James Harden leaves. And also what's interesting with Melton is the 76ers gave up the 23rd pick in last year's draft for him. The Portland Trail Blazers have the 23rd pick in this year's draft, so Philadelphia could wash their hands if they wanted to and get back the same exact pick in probably a deeper draft that they gave up for D'Anthony Melton. So that could make some sense. As far as Melton goes as a player, he's a really good perimeter defensive guy. He's a guy I actually liked in the second round back when he was drafted. I thought he was a sleeper, and so far that has been the case. He averaged 10 points per game, 4 rebounds, 2.5 assists while shooting 39% from 3. He's another one of those 3-and-D guys. More of a guard than Royce ONeill or FinneySmith especially. He's only 6'2", but if the Blazers traded out Anthony Simons, this would be a great guy to get as a third guard behind Damian Lillard and Shaedon Sharpe. And the final target is one who I have a little bit of a soft spot for, and I don't think he's going to get traded, but I would love to see Zach Collins back in a Portland Trail Blazer uniform. Now, we all remember Zach Collins for being injury prone and not being able to see the floor. However, in the past couple of seasons in San Antonio, he has developed into a really good NBA player. Last season, in 23 minutes per game, he averaged 11.6 points, 6.5 rebounds, and 3 assists. Collins has turned himself into more of a passing big man, which is really fun to see. He also shot 57% from 2 and 37% from 3. As we all know, he can play the center spot, has the length and the rim protection ability for that, but also has the mobility to play the power forward position and can space the floor from there as well. So I really like Zach Collins as a potential backup center option behind Jusuf Nurkic, who could also play next to him. That was the idea when the Blazers started Zach Collins in the year where he dislocated his shoulder. That was the bubble year. That season just fell apart. But Zach Collins is a better player now than he was back then. He's developed so far in San Antonio. And of course, the one year the Blazers went on a major run to the Western Conference Finals was a year where Zach Collins had a big defensive impact in that postseason. Good role players like that are needed on this Blazer team, and looking back, the Blazers should have brought him back. He had a healthy season last year, and this year he's going into the final year of a deal where he's making $7.7 million. Now, that fits inside that GP2 trade exception, so the Portland Trail Blazers wouldn't have to trade out any salary to match him, but it would probably take a first-round pick for him. Maybe the 23rd pick, might take more than that. I think that San Antonio values him super highly, but with the Spurs getting the #1 pick in this year's draft and having Jeremy Sohan entrenched as their long-term starting power forward, Victor Wembanyama, I think, is going to start at the center position next year, which might make Zach Collins expendable for the Spurs. If that's the case, I definitely think the Portland Trail Blazers have to take a hard look at him. He is my favorite backup center target in the league. I like him more than a Daniel Gafford as he's cheaper, a better shooter, and I think a little bit more versatile as a defensive player. It can also pass the ball a little bit. Zach Collins would be one of the top 3 backup bigs in the league next year, in my opinion, if the Blazers brought him into the fold, and it would make Portland a little less reliant upon Jusuf Nurkic, which even for me as somebody who thinks Nurkic is underrated and I'm a Nurkic fan, I still think that would be a good thing to have a good backup in case Nurk doesn't have it on any given night. Anyway, let me know what you think of this target list. Who are your favorite targets on this list? Are there targets in this mold that I should have included in my list or that you would include in your list? Let me know down in the comment section below. Leave a like on this video. It really helps me out, and subscribe if you're new to the channel. We cover everything Portland Trail Blazers, from trades, draft prospects, draft picks, free agency. We'll have big streams for the draft and free agency. Looking forward to those. And with that being said, we're out of here. I'll catch you next time. Until then, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.